Hey, comrades, what's up, everyone? Hope you're having a good morning. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and definitely comment so we can share in revelry or fight in the comment section below. All right, cool. So I finally got around to finishing Full Moon, which is the second book in the Dresden Files series. I like these books a lot. Just a lot of stuff was going on, and I just didn't feel like I had time to read. And then finally I was like, I just want to finish this book, because I was more than halfway through. So I've been reading this book for like 2 months. Now, the great thing about the writer of this book, which the name eludes me at this point, but the guy who writes the Dresden Files, is that his books are very like masculine oriented, which is good because I'm a dude. They got magic, so there's like that fantasy element, which is good. And then he just writes in a way where you get like a good description without it being too much, which granted, I love Deanne Rice and her like lurid her lurid descriptions of things, and just over, like the soft texture of the moist velvet something, blah, 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 right? I'm not an author, I don't know. But you read her books and you'll if you've ever read an Anne Rice novel, it is like it's like a romance novel, only 10 times better with a better story. But a lot of them are just straight up like erotic romance novels. But she writes so well and so detailed, it's great. But this guy, he's got a little bit of that without being too much. And then there's just like action, and he does a good job. And I feel like this book flew by. So I honestly liked the first book better than this one. I feel like there was more stuff and it was more interesting. But this one like flew by, right? And it's almost to its detriment, because like when I'm thinking about it, there really wasn't that much to the story, because there's so much action. But that's fun, and he writes action well, and I'm like vested in it, and I don't get confused. It's not so much like you look at like somebody like R.A. Salvatore today, and his sometimes. I mean, I liked him generally as a writer. I feel like his stories get a little mucky, and like it's kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, because I've tried to read all the Dresden novels, and I think I've gotten through the first like 6, which is like the Menzo-Berrazen arc, the first 3 ones. And then the second arc, which is the Halfling's Gem. But I always kind of hit a wall. And so it's taken me like my entire life. Like I read Menzo-Berrazen, which is like the first book, or whatever. The first book's like, I don't remember. The first book in that series, like when I was in high school, like decades ago. And a couple of years ago, I finished like the 6th book. And there's like 12 or something. So like of the Dresden and like life novels. So I'm sure I'll get around to it eventually, but... Did I miss my exit? Oh no, I think that's it up there. Anyway, so, but these just like, they like fly by. And there's like, I have no complaints about this guy's writing at all thus far. So first 2 books, great. Second one is just a little more, there's a little less sustenance to it. And then it kind of like at the beginning, there's a lot kind of tying it to the first book and what's happened. Because this book takes place 6 months after the first book. And Dresden's kind of, he was like a hero, sort of, but also not really, because a lot of what he does is secret, but the White Council's off his ass. We don't have that asshole with the big sword anymore wandering around. He's got this girl who wants to be like his wizarding apprentice, and he like is not really that invested in that concept, so he's kind of like a little bit helping her out. Like she wants to learn how to make like a defensive circle, and he kind of like scrolls it out on a napkin at the beginning of the book, and it's like, hey, just come by another time and we can like practice this before you like do it for real. And she's like, for real, for sure, Z's. But he's kind of on the outs with Murphy. There's a whole thing with Marcone, who's like the mob boss for Chicago. And he's going around saying that Dresden works for him, and so people are kind of suspicious. And then there's just a lot of kind of shady stuff that happened in the first book that like Dresden didn't do anything wrong, but because he's working like undercover, essentially, there's a lot of like doubt from people. And so, for example, well, let me start with this. So kind of the main crew... In case you never read any of these books, don't know anything that I'm talking about, you can always go back and watch my video. It's on Rumble and BitChute. But there's Harry Dresden. So this is kind of if most people are familiar with like the Harry Potter thing. This is like that. It's kind of that magic reality or magic realism or whatever, where there's magic and wizards and vampires and werewolves and all that stuff, and they exist. And there's like a place called the Neverwhere or the Never Ever, which is like a magical world. but there's only like, I think in this book he says there's 12 wizards in like all of the United States of America, or 20. Yeah, 25 maybe. There's not enough. There's like one for every like 2 states or something, from what I recall. He said. So I think it's like there's like 25. Like there's lots of people who can do like hedge magic or little magic, but the people who actually have true magical power, like Harry Dresden, is like a super powerful, naturally born mage with a background like his mom is like a descendant of like great mages and all this stuff, and he was trained by like a dark wizard. So that was the whole point with the council. Anyway, he's got a cat called Mister, who's like the comic relief character, and then he's got this spirit in a skull who he didn't put him there. He's just had this thing, and this guy's exists for like thousands of years. So he has like all this unlimited knowledge, and he's very useful for potion making and for doing research on spells or different kind of creatures. And he gets used in this book a little bit at the beginning, but then like in the first book he was like a kind of like a secondary main character. There was a lot of him, and he was doing stuff and very involved. In this, we get a bit of him at the beginning, and then he kind of nopes out. There's Susan, who's like the main love interest of Dresden. She's like a sexy Latina lady who works for like a tabloid journal that investigates paranormal stuff, right? Then there's Murphy. Murphy's like the head of the special investigations unit for like the Chicago Police Department. She's like a cute blonde chick who's sass mouth, and she's very dedicated to her job. She's a crack shot. She's like very fit. Just kind of like an ideal cop, but like also like a cute girl at the same time, because again, this is a book written for men. So that's what we want. And then Marcone is like the kingpin of the mafia in Chicago. He's got that kind of Al Capone thing where he's like a man of the people, and he does a lot of illegal stuff, but he's not really like all about like murder or causing chaos. He's very much about having like, I am in charge of the crime in Chicago, so it's very organized. It is not like chaotic. There's not like a lot of gang fights in the street. It's honestly one of those situations where if you had somebody like this today in America, in Chicago, there would be 1,000 less deaths like a month. It'd be much nicer for everybody around. And it's one of those situations where it's like I'm of two minds of this. Like, it'd be nice if everyone was just taken care of and everyone could work together and there wasn't like a need to be crime, but we live in like the real world. And so thus having like an organized crime, like a kingpin sort of character, like a master thief, kind of like a guild master of like a thief's guild in like a fantasy setting or whatever. It's like virtually required to have like a stable society. Because you need someone who's like in charge of all this stuff, and who can kind of keep all these elements together or at bay, so that they're not causing problems. So he fills that role pretty well. And then Murphy's got a partner. He's not that important in this book. Let's see, Susan, Mr. Yeah, those are like the main reoccurring characters that I can remember. Oh, there's a guy who runs like a bar. He was much more predominant, again, in the first book and the beginning of this book, but we don't spend that much time with him. He runs this bar where like wizards and stuff can come, because there's a whole thing with wizardry in this, that if you have the more magical power you have, the less able you are to like use technology. So like Dresden can't use like a computer because the computer would just fry out, and he's got like a rotary phone and stuff like that, right? And these books take place in like the 90s or early 2000s, right? That's the kind of technology level we're looking at. Like, people don't have cell phones, really. It might even be a little earlier. Like, the 90s, I would say, is a good, like, kind of, this is generally the era. Because there's really not cell phones. And I had a cell phone in, like, 99 or 2000. But I was, like, one of the first people I knew who had one. Okay. And then it's Chicago. It's just, like, 90s, early 2000s Chicago. So you get, like, landmarks and stuff, but you don't spend a lot of time with that. Let's see, the White Council. Yeah, the White Council kind of manages all the mages who are not like evil mages, and the ones who actually have power and can actually do things. Like, there's like little, again, he refers to them as head mages sometimes, or head witches or whatever. And they're people who have like limited magical power, but they're not like super strong. And so the White Council just kind of leaves them alone. The White Council's big thing is you cannot use magic to kill. You can only use it to like defend yourself. And like no summoning demons, and there's a few other things. But yeah, I think that's like the big stuff to kind of carry over. And then Dresden has like he lives in like the basement apartment, which has like a laboratory. It's like pretty expansive depending on like the needs of like the story, to be honest. But I think it's supposed to be like 4 or 5 rooms. It's supposed to be pretty spacious, but it's like in the not the best part of town, and it's like in a rundown kind of apartment. It's just like a lot of space, and he doesn't need a lot of stuff because again, he's using like candlelight and fireplace and rotary phone. Like he doesn't have a lot of technology. Like writes stuff in his books and whatnot. Okay, his big thing is he wears like a duster, like a big kind of jacket and like a fun hat to go with it, like a bowl. No, not a bowler hat. I don't know what it's called. He also usually has like a staff, and then he has like a blasting rod, and those are some of his like things of magic. And then he has this silver amulet that his mom gave him that he carries around. Okay, he usually keeps it under his clothes, but then it comes up. All right, so full moon. So full moon starts off with Murphy calling him. Dresden heads out to investigate, and there is like this body of one of Marcone's men, and it's torn up like a wolf ate it up real good. And there's like the window's broken, and it's like a huge hot mess. And this is not like the first time they found this. This is like it had occurred a couple times, and it's occurred around the full moon, right? So werewolves, obviously. But Dresden doesn't know that much about werewolves, so he heads back home and wakes up like the skull spirit and is like, "Hey, bro, can you help me out here?" And he's like, I don't know that much about the whole situation. Let me do some research." So he researches that up, and we learn that there's a bunch of different wolves. And I can't remember all of them because I kept getting like the terms messed up. There's not just like there's like Loup-Garou, Hexen Wolf, and then there's another one. Those are like and I think there's a fourth one. But essentially, like the Hexen Wolves use like a magical device, or they're like enchanted to become like wolf creatures. There's the Hexen Wolf, which is like they've been cursed. And that's like the one where like it's not voluntary. They turn into wolves in the full moon. The one with they get like these guys have like these belts, and the belts like activate and turn them into like wolves, and then like their predatory nature like takes over. Then that's Loup-Garou. That's the the Hexen Wolf is the belt guys. The Loup-Garou is the one, maybe they were bit by a wolf, or there was like a curse or something that transforms them and they lose complete control. Then there's another kind where they I don't remember the name, but the other wolves from meat. There's a wolf that can transform into like a human essentially, named Tara. She's one of the main characters of the book. The Loup-Garou for the book is McFinn. I can't remember his first name. And then Tara has like she like gives some of her magic or her abilities over to this group of children, essentially, like teenagers, and so they can all transform into wolves, but they're not that powerful. And then there's like the street wolves, and I think that's the fourth one. They're different. So I don't know if they even transform into wolves, but they have like wolf-like characteristics. Like they're like stronger and more like oriented toward. They're almost like more traditional when you think of like a werewolf, but they don't transform into like that werewolf, if that makes sense. I'm sure I don't have it 100% correct, but it's something like that. So he learns about that. He also makes like a deal with a demon at some point, where like the demon gets like part of his name, and in return, Dresden learns some like important information about how to like counteract some of this stuff, or some more information about the wolves generally. And then at some point around this time, Murphy, again, I apologize, I'm getting some of this stuff wrong. I'm recalling like the first half of the book, which I read like several months ago. But it's generally, this is generally what happens. So then Murphy calls him up, so he heads off to another crime scene, and there he finds the girl he taught like the defense magic to, and she has like a napkin with his name on it, or with his words on it, and she's all torn up and eaten up like a wolf. And then there's like this magical circle of silver that's like been kind of rubbed out and destroyed. Oh, also, at the first crime scene, Dresden meets 4 FBI agents: Denton, Ben, Denton, Bean. It's like Benn, and it's a woman. Harris and like Wilson, I think. And they're all these FBI agents. They're super sketch for reasons we'll find about shortly. And they're the ones who put it into Dresden's head that Marcone is involved in this somehow. Marcone, at some point also around this time, approaches Dresden while he's like walking home, gets him to, forces him into his car and offers that Dresden work for him, and gives him like a really like sweet deal. But Dresden's like, "No, I'm not going to work for you. You're a criminal, blah, blah, blah. Like, just stay out of my business." And Marcone's like, "You're going to regret that." And he's like, "All right, whatever, man." So going back, so then once Murphy shows this new crime scene to Dresden, he's like kind of freaking out because this was like a girl he should have protected, and he feels guilty about that. And again, it's very masculine, so of course he's got to be the protector. And then she arrests him, or she puts handcuffs on him. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh," and at this point, like Dresden is like gone in search, and he's found Tara because Tara was like following them away from one of the crime scenes, and he sees like these other wolves, and he like runs into like the street wolves. That's what it is. The FBI tells him to go investigate this garage where like the street wolves are, who are kind of like very antagonistic. And he goes in there and he like blasts one of them, and so they get like super hopped up, angry at him, and he like has to run away from that. So he's already having like a lot of problems, and then he goes to this crime scene, and then she arrests him. And then Carmichael, who's a partner of Murphy, is like, "What are you doing? I don't know what's going on." And she's like, "He was involved in this. I know it. Something, something, blah, blah, blah." And while he's in the car, Tara comes up and like breaks him out and is like, "Let's go. You got to help me with my fiance." So we find out that Tara is engaged to the guy who is trapped in the circle inside the house named McFinn. And that kind of what happened was he has been afflicted with like this disease of turning it, at the full moon or whatever for a long time, but that she was able to help him like establish this defensive circle somehow in Silver like a while ago, so that he could just stay in there, and then like the magic circle would keep him trapped when he was like raging during the full moon, and then he would like come out of it and be okay. But then at some point someone came along and like jacked the shit up. Like they don't know how they found out about him or whatever, and so then they elicited this other girl, Kara or something, the one that was trying to be like Dresden's apprentice, to come fix it, but then she was obviously not able to do that well enough, and so, or do it on time, and so then the guy escaped and killed her, and then it's gone on a rampage, and so she's like, "We gotta go find him." Excuse me. And so they go to track him down because he's like out and about and in hiding, essentially, because everyone's trying to figure out, they've got this like werewolf on the loose who's been killing people every like full moon for a while now. And they eventually track him down to like a cave, not a cave. They find him in like the park, like Central Park area. I've been to Chicago like once, so I don't know, but it seems like they're in like someplace in the city where there's like woods. Excuse me. And so they track him down, and they got to like rebuild the circle like immediately before he turns into like a werewolf again. And so they try to do that, but then that doesn't work out because like the FBI shows up, and then the police shows up because somehow they like were able to track them down. And so then the three of them like run off, and they're trying to escape, and Dresden like jacks up his leg. And then the police they grab McFinn and arrest him because he's like guilty, right, for doing all this crazy rampage stuff. Take him back to the police station. Meanwhile, Tetra, and Dresden escape. So then Dresden heads back home, and like I think earlier actually he was making like potions, and one of the potions he made gave him a lot of energy, and one of the potions he made makes him like invisible. So he's like got to go break this guy out of prison so he can build the circle, so that he can make sure he doesn't go on another rampage and kill everybody. And so he takes this potion that makes him seem like just like a regular delivery guy. So like essentially it's just like people avoid looking at him, and not like, it's not even they avoid looking at him, it's that they don't notice him. Like he'll be like, "Hey," and they'll look up at him, and then they'll like forget that they spoke to him. It makes him like very unrememberable and very like bland, so that no one really picks him out or looks at him for longer than a few seconds. So Dresden's wandering around, keeping a low profile, and eventually gets to the prison. Well, and he sees the FBI arguing with Murray, and there's some other arguments with other people, but eventually gets to the prison and kind of sneaks in there and sees McFinn. But it's too late. McFinn's able to he transforms, opens the door, and starts rampaging. He kills a lot. This gets like real bloody real fast. He kills the guy, or he like bites up the guy. I think he's dead. He kills like the prison guard guy, and then he goes on like a rampage, and he's like ransacking and eating dudes up and going like completely crazy. And at some point, Dresden's like freaking out because of Murphy, and he tries to track her down. And then the wolf gets shot because she has like silver bullets for some reason. I think she like read whatever his report is, because he wrote up a report about wolves and stuff, which is part of the reason she thought he was guilty, because she's a crazy woman. She's a crazy fucking broad. So she has silver bullets, and she hits the wolf a few times, but it's not enough. So Dresden has to like gather a lot of his magical energy, like a lot, and just like blast the shit out of the wolf, knocking him like through the wall, out through the prison, and just creating like a huge hole and whatnot. So good times for him. At this point, now he's got to BTFO, but he's kind of tapped out. And so he tries to work his way out, and he's able to escape from the prison because it's like a complete carnal house at this point. Like it's all jacked up and messed up. But he feels like completely tapped out on magic. Like he's not able to do anything. He gets out, and he gets grabbed by Tetra and Susan, who's here now, and they're driving away from the scene and trying to like get him to be a place where he can rest, and they can figure out like the whole prison thing and the McFinn thing a little bit later. But then he realizes that they're being tailed, and they're being tailed by the street wolves, and he's like, oh fuck, I don't have enough magical energy, because he goes to like pop their tires, and it's like he's tapped out like a lot of his magical reserve at this point. So he's kind of going, and this is the theme for the rest of the book, is like he's really tapped out of his magical energy. And like magical energy as defined in this world comes from two places. If it's dark magic, it can come from like negative emotions. It's almost like the Force. But there's like a stronger power that comes from deeper inside, and that's where like the good magic comes from. Like love, essentially, is the key component. Because magic, you have to instill like emotional energy, essentially, into the spells to make them more strong. But he like really wore himself out over the last bit of time dealing with all this shit. So he's like, "Hey, you guys keep going. I'm gonna take care of this." And so he rolls out of like the van into the side of the road, and then he uses like the last little bit of magical energy he has to like pop the tires of the truck, causing it to like roll and all this stuff. And he's like, all right, and he goes to get up, but then he gets like beat up pretty good and nabbed by these guys. And right before he's like passing out after being like beat up, he sees the FBI following closely behind, and he catches the eye of one of the guys, and he's like, oh, it all makes sense now. And so at this point he realizes that the FBI is in on the whole werewolf scheme, and that they're somehow involved with all this stuff. Anyway, so he wakes up in the street wolf's like garage, and he's tied up, and he has like no magical energy left, and he thinks he does still, but like really that blowing the tires and the fuego and all that good stuff is like he's completely tapped out. Because this guy's making like threats towards him, and then he's got like two companions that are like making threats, and then he goes to like do something. He's like, I'm gonna taunt this guy and then use magic, and he goes and he just has like a pounding headache and can't do shit. So he's like, fuck. It's at this point that Marcone kind of rolls up, and he's like, I see you got the Dresden. And they get into like, him and the Street Wolf guys get into like an argument, and then they start getting into like a shootout in this garage. And then at some point, the FBI like show up, but they're not the FBI. I mean, they're still the FBI, but they're not in their FBI. They're not like human guys. They're in their wolf form, because they got the belts to let them do that. And it's like, oh my, and they're killing like everybody. Like all the Street Wolves get slaughtered at this point, and Marcone is like, and Hastings, his like bosom companion, like they BTFO'd, and the FBI's, there's three of them that are wolves, and they're like eating and humping, and they're talking about Dresden, and he's like, fuck me, I'm in so much trouble. But then he hears like a scratching on the floor, and it ends up being Tetra's like claw. She's like created a tunnel for him to escape with, and he's like, hell yeah. So he's able to like get out from under the wall, and out there is the fourth member of the FBI, and he's in his wolf form, and the alpha wolves, who are like the kids that Tetra like trained to be wolves using magic or whatever. They're like fighting but not doing well. A couple of them are pretty injured. And so at that point, Dresden taunts the wolf, and as the wolf's going to get him, he grabs like where the belt should be and rips it off, so the guy just becomes a regular person. And then the alpha wolves are like, oh yeah, time to kill. And he's like, no, let him go. We're going to keep this belt and his gun and go fuck yourself. And the guy's like, no, you can't take my thing. And we learned that the FBI's been in on it the whole time. They've been the ones who've instigated all the attacks, and they're the ones who released McFinn so that he take the blame, because at some point someone told them about the White Council. And if the White Council found out they were doing this shit, the White Council would come in real hard. And the White Council is like a lot of Dresden plus powers, plus even stronger wizards that would just emulate them completely. So and then we don't get like a full reasoning why they're doing this, but we get some hints that the FBI, these guys are like tired of the corruption and tired of Marcone, and that they're going to turn on him next, Marcone, and all that good stuff. And so but the Alpha Wolves and Tetra and Dresden, like they get out of there. Susan's got a van she rented, and so they all hop in the van and they go back to one of the girls. She's like super wealthy, I guess, not like herself, but her parents are like super wealthy in like the nice part of Chicago, and her parents are like out of town. So they all go there and they start like recovering and getting some bandaged up. And there's some other Alpha Wolves, and then we see that we meet like some of them. The Billy and Wendy are the two that keep getting named. And they don't have they might have a future role, so that's why I bring them up, because here at the end of the book we spend like a decent amount of time like learning about them and their relationship. It's nothing too crazy. It's like a few pages of stuff that's kind of dedicated to them and Dresden, watching them interact and stuff. But then Billy, I think it's Billy or Bobby, but Billy convinces Dresden to let them go with him because he's going to go face. He's going to go to Marcone's place to kind of face. It's where everyone's gathering. McFinn's going to head that way reasons. And at some point we learned that, okay, so McFinn, he was very much against, or he was very for this, like, I can't remember exactly what it's called, like the Northwest Greenery Passage or something. It's like a preservation. He's like a preservationist with natural stuff like trees and forests and stuff. And then Marcone's trying to build something like a roadway or townhomes, or I don't remember exactly, but there's like construction versus nature whole situation, and they are on opposite ends. So Marcone wants McFinn dead, and I don't think he was like directly responsible for him being transformed into a werewolf, but it seemed like there was, but that was like a predominant issue, is that this rivalry between these two guys and putting them against each other, and that's why McFinn. There's a lot of reasons why McFinn would not like Marcone, because he was heavily involved, and I think he had Marcone had gotten what he wanted, if I remember correctly. Anyway, it's not super important, but that's a whole issue. So McFinn as a wolf like really wants to kill Marcone because his human form really doesn't like him. So it's like his peak, like, this is what I want to do. Anyway, so, and then the FBI guys mentioned that they're kind of involved. They're going to go get Marcone. Like, that's their big thing, is they want to bust his balls and get him in jail or killed or whatever, because they're tired of his corrupt stuff. So Dresden and crew head out. Susan drives them. There's like 6 Alpha Wolves, and there's Tetra and then him. And again, Dresden is like completely tapped out of magic, but he's got that wolf belt, which does come up later. So Dresden gets Tetra to like throw him over the wall by short-circuiting like a camera, and Marcone has like this estate that is like completely ridiculous. Like, it seems like it's 10 acres or more. Like, he's like, yeah, there's like a little lake and there's like a forest, and like if you're in the center of the structure by the house and someone shoots a gun, like you could barely hear it on the side of the road if you were standing like right next to the wall, if that. And so it's like super, crazy kind of situation. And the Alpha Wolves and Tetra are supposed to go through like a gap in the wall that's somewhere else in the wall, but it's like further down so they can go faster. And Dresden is injured just from like all this shit going on and falling out of a car, getting beat up. So he's like limping and having a hard time. So he's like, hey, just throw me over the wall and then I'll wait here and then you guys can meet up with me. But after some time, no one meets up with him. So he's like, fuck. And so he starts sneaking through this like palatial estate, and eventually he sees one of the wolves, the Alpha Wolves, get like shot with something like a dart and pass out. And so he hides, and he sees the FBI guys, and they're standing there, all 4 of them. And then nearby, Marcone walks up with and the FBI agents like give more information. They're like, all right, when are we going to kill this Marcone guy? We're going to wait for this other douchebag to show up, and then we'll take care of all of them at the same time. And then we'll throw the Alpha Wolves in there too, and we can, blame it all on them. Essentially, their evil plans being revealed as they like discuss everything that's going on. And Marcone shows up, and his buddy Hastings has like the dart rifle, and so they're chit chatting about moving they have like a trap set up for McFinn, and they're going to throw the Alphas in there. And Marcone's like, what about Dresden? There's no way he's not here. And like, well, we didn't see him or smell him. And he's like, he's got to be here. And at some point, Dresden's like, he's like, well, get out there and find him. Like, we got to search through here. And Marconi doesn't know yet that they transform into wolves. So he's not aware the FA is like, these FA guys are essentially going to backstab him. To him, they're just like helping clean up like this wolf stuff and take care of like the killings. And Marconi's like an assistant somehow. But Dresden tries to like sneak out of there because the FBI starts fanning out. And they hear him, so they start chasing after him, and he goes and hides inside like underneath a tree, and then he's able to get the jump on Destin, who's the head FBI guy, and he gets his belt off, and he gets his gun, and he's like, all right. So then he has him call the rest of the FBI guys out, and they're all standing there, and they're all super angry, and they're about to like, because they're like, at this point they've been using like this magical wolf magic, which is like black magic, so much that it's transformed their like personalities into being killers and being much more aggressive and like animalistic. And so there's like a woman, and she's like tearing off her clothes, so she's like naked and stuff, and their guys are pretty antsy too. But Denton commands them to take off their belts, throw them on the ground, throw weapons on the ground, all that good stuff. And then they're like chit-chatting, and then Denton's like, go get the package. And then Dresden's like, what are you talking about? What's going on? And they pull out Murphy, and they got her tied up. And then one of the guys, Harry, I think, has a knife to her throat, and he's like, hey, if you shoot me, they're going to kill her, and that's going to be on you, and yada, yada, yada. And then what exactly happens here? So then they're about to cut Murphy, and so Dresden like moves the gun away from Denton, but the Denton like, is able to wrestle it away from him because Dresden's all injured and stuff. And they knock him out, and then Marconi and his buddy come out, and then they knock Marconi out and shoot like Hastings in the chest a bunch of times. And Marconi's like, the fuck? And he's like, yeah, we're betraying you because you're an evil asshole, and so we want you dead. So then Dresden gets thrown into a pit with Murphy and Tetra's there and the Alpha Wolves, and then they hang Marconi over the pit, and this is the pit they were going to catch McFinn in as like bait. And then the FBI guys are like, see you laters. And so they meander off. Marconi is able, and then the McFinn shows up in like his giant werewolf form, and he's stalking around the pit like trying to do stuff. And McFinn's able to, or not McFinn, Marconi is able to get like a knife out that he had hid, and he throws it at like a rope, so it cuts and it drops down so that they're able to get out. And then Dresden is able to scurry up, and he almost gets killed by the wolf, but then he's able to get out, and then he like leads the wolf on like a merry chase. He also gets shot at by the FBI guys who are like kind of chasing after him, and he's like, all right, got my trump card, I didn't want to do this, but I have to. And he like puts on the belt and turns into a wolf. And then he talks about like, it gets really in detail with like, oh, I can sense the wind and I can smell this and that. And then the lady werewolf shows up, and he beats the shit out of her, like almost kills her completely. And then it's super dark, and there's like all this stuff going on. And then he like backs off for some reason. And Harry shows up, or one of the other guys shows up as like a wolf, and finishes her off, like just kills her straight up, like comes over and like eats her up. And then the guy who Dresden stole his belt. That guy shows up, and then the other wolf, the FBI wolf, turns on him, and so he shoots him, and then the other guy's like, "Rah!" And he shoots, and it's like, oh, they just needed bullets. The bullets kill these things like really easily, apparently, because the guy's like dying, and then he starts transforming back into a human. He pulls his gun out, and then he shoots that guy. So now they're dead, and so then Dresden is like, all right. So he goes and he goes and finds Denton, and then they fight, and there's like a whole thing where it's like, he's stronger, but I'm faster, and I know what the fuck I'm doing, and this guy's just an asshole. And so he beats the shit out of him, like bites up his leg, and almost, he's like about to eat him. And then Susan shows up, and she's like, Dresden, stop. And he's like, what? And if he does, it takes a little cajoling from Susan. Oh yeah, him and Susan like bang it out before the night before they came out here. They have like a sexual relationship. But it wasn't in graphic detail. This is not an Anne Rice novel, as I mentioned before. So at that point, he turns back into a wolf and takes off the belt, and he's like, he's like really sad-eponymous about the whole situation because he feels really embarrassed. And he tells Susan to get and the wolves kind of show up, the alpha wolf, but not in their wolf form. And he's like, get them and go. And Tetra's there, and then Murphy shows up at some point as well. So we got everybody here. He sends Susan away. And then Murphy won't leave because she's a cop, and this is her crime scene, and she's got to finish whatever she started. and Tetra goes to distract McFinn so that they can rescue Marcone. That's right. And so Tetra, they end up hearing like she gets injured, and so it's just McFinn out on his own doing whatever he's doing. And Murphy's gone, but he's able to rescue Marcone from like the pit. But then McFinn's coming, and so Dresden's like, this is it. I guess I'm dead. I don't know what else to do here. I have nothing that I can do. But then he remembers, or he feels like the amulet that his mom gave him, and he remembers it's inherited silver, which is like the weakness of this thing. So then he starts spinning it around and casting like the spell with, and this is the point where it's like, he's got a shonen anime reaching deep and draw out that last bit of like power. And then right before he's about to like, right as he's like finishing his spell and he's in the midst of the concentration and he's got to stop this thing, Murray like jumps out in front of him and puts her gun up, and she's like, get out of the way. And he's like, the fuck are you doing? But he can't stop. He can't say anything to her. He can't move. He's got to finish his spell because McFinn starts charging and he's going to like kill Murphy. And so he takes the amulet, finishes the spell, tosses it like a star, like a shot at McFinn. And at the same time, Murphy shoots at him and he gets like, he gets grazed by this bullet, so he collapses. McFinn like explodes in like the silvery light, and falls to the ground next to Dresden, and then kind of like fades into nothing. And at the last minute, he's like, "Thank you," or "I'm sorry," or something. And then it's like Dresden's like, "Oh, I feel blackness," blah blah blah. And then he sees Murray standing over him, and she's like, "Get the fuck up, you retard." And he's like, "I'm not dead." And she's like, "Did you really think I was gonna shoot you?" And he's like, "I don't know, maybe." And she's like, "You're an asshole and a misogynist." And fuck you. And so he looks behind her and he sees Denton, who's still alive, and he's dead with a bullet through his forehead. And so then we get to Dresden like recalls the next weeks of time. So the police show up, and Murphy's considered a hero because she stopped all this crazy stuff. And Susan has like film of the wolves fighting, and she has film of like Murphy taking care of the wolves or something, and that goes on the evening news, and everyone's like, holy shit, like she deserves an award. And so she gets like promoted and gets like an actual placard in her door instead of just like a piece of paper saying her name in the special victims unit or whatever, special interest unit, whatever it's called. And Dresden kind of like, good, thank goodness I can like fade out of here. But he doesn't talk to Susan because he's still embarrassed about like losing control of his abilities and all this stuff. And then the Alpha Wolves, then Tetra like has a conversation with him at some point where she's like, I'm going to head home. I'm sad about McFinn, but you did the right thing, so it is what it is. And, then he realizes she's a wolf who transforms into a human, not the other way around. And she's like, hey, if you're ever in the Northwest, call for me and I'll come. And so she takes off. And the Alpha Wolves all want him to be like their magic teacher. And to go on adventures and like save and be like a superhero, and he's like, I don't know if I'm going to do that. And then eventually the government like pulls the spot with the wolves and all that stuff, and like people forget because they don't want to believe in magic and whatnot. And so Dresden goes back to just kind of doing his thing. He's like working, solving mystery crimes, getting like cats out of trees and shit. And then finally, after a couple of weeks, he's like, you know what? I think I'm ready to re-engage with Susan, because she keeps sending him like flowers and notes being like, hey, I'm waiting for you, like whenever you're ready, like I understand, like I'm not mad or whatever. So the book wraps up with him being like, all right, let's do this. And he calls her on the phone. The end. So that's Full Moon. Full Moon is pretty good. These books are fantastic. They're like it's a whole like Harry Potter thing, right? Like, what if magic exists in our world, or the magicians? Only this is much better than both those things. And it's definitely like oriented towards like Gen X, early millennial men. Just in like the setup, how he interacts with other people, his like nobility, plus his like, shameful weaknesses. Or not shameful, like his like golly Joe Willikers. Like, look at that, But he's like a shonen anime hero. Because no matter what happens, he always like finds a way, and no matter how this dude gets beat the shit out of like a lot in these first two books, and he always finds a way to like get back up, and I love it. So it's like the shonen anime of the Western wizarding book world. But yeah, I highly recommend. Like I said, I like the first one better. This one was fun, and it's faster and more intense, but still written well. Like it's not like worse in any way. It's just out of the two books, I'm like, yeah, I enjoyed the story of the first one. It was like more mysterious and like more magical and stuff. This was like more intense and fast. So I'm excited to see what the next book, which is Grave Peril, which I will probably start reading today, is. But yeah, super great. So hey, if you liked me ranting about all this stuff, or didn't, go ahead, comment, like, and subscribe, and I will catch you all later.